Good morning. Welcome back to Open Your Eyes this Wednesday. It's January and I'm here with someone who's going to help us. If we haven't yet started our nutritional goals for 2017, we're still in January. Isani, a person who's pretty disciplined, but some of us need a little nutritional help.
I've fallen on the wayside on a number of occasions, but I try to keep it together for the most part.
It's time. There's time to recuperate from that. So we're joined by Doris Gaylene Sutherland. She's a nutritionist with Belize Healthcare Partners, and we're going to go through some tips and advice for nutrition at different stages of life, because as we grow, our bodies change and our nutritional needs change. I was really curious, though, a little bit about what you do. What is a nutritionist? You're not just giving people diets, and you have a lot of insight into food and what it does for us and what it does against us as well. Can you tell us a little bit about your job and what you do with your clients?
All right. First of all, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm very happy to be here. Well, as a nutritionist, as you just mentioned, I work with diets, specifically individually, and I also speak at certain schools that do a lot of public speaking. I work also at the hospital, so I see not only healthy patients, but I work also with sick patients, whether they have diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, cancer, or any other terminal disease. So I would see even pregnant women, so it's a wide range of areas where I tend to work with.
So we're going to start with children, because when kids are managing all their activities, they have school, they have play, maybe they're in sports, maybe they're in some other type of after school activity. Parents are busy, everyone's busy. What are your tips in terms of what children really need, and how can we get them there? Because no matter what generation you're from, the stuff that is good for you is not always the stuff that you're attracted to eating.
Exactly.
So how do you work with children, and what tips do you have in terms of getting them to be eating what they need to eat?
Okay. First of all children, they should have what we know as a balanced diet. Okay, when we talk about a balanced diet, this means that they should provide all the nutrients that the child needs in order to improve an adequate growth and development. Okay, it's a good thing that we're talking about childhood, since childhood is the best time to start, okay, and to improve their healthy eating habits, because what we as parents give our children in their first years of life will reflect on how their medical and nutritional status would be as an adult. Okay, so it is never too late to start to make these changes. Okay, and it is always recommended for parents to make small changes instead of making very large or very strict.
So don't come home one day and
changes.
say, we're cutting out all dessert starting tomorrow, because that probably would backfire.
That would backfire, and it would make it a little bit difficult for the children to adapt and get into these healthy eating habits. Okay, so we start to make small changes by maybe including what we call superfoods. Okay, there are many superfoods that can be given to children. Okay, in these superfoods we can find, for example, whole grains, a lot of dairy products, which is something that a lot of children would lack on. Dairy products we include milk, cheese, yogurt, fruits, a lot of green vegetables, nut breads, also eggs. Okay, beans, which are known as superfoods for children.
And these are basic staples that are available in Belize to most people. Some people have, we've heard about feeding programs, but if you can manage some of those superfoods, you're saying that's really the starting point.
That's really the starting point for them.
Okay. I find one of the challenges as a parent having a child who's in primary school, the idea of trying to find a balanced diet and trying to have the child stick to a balanced diet, in light of the fact that you are at work as a parent and the child is at school during the course of the day, and sometimes parents don't often prepare their lunch from home and then have their children take it with them to school. Instead, they're given lunch money. And the idea of giving them lunch money, in my view, takes away from being able to monitor what they're eating in terms of the nutritional benefits of that particular meal, specifically lunch, for instance.
Okay. Yes, that's very common, not only in Belize, everywhere we see that if we don't eat healthy at home, then we won't eat healthy at school. Okay, so what happens is that most parents know what children need to eat, but it's very difficult when it comes to actually having the child eat those certain specific foods. So the education needs to start at home. Okay, if we don't educate our children at home, then it makes it a little bit difficult for them to have their own healthy choices at school.
And if you can control at least what's at home,
Yeah.
then maybe when they're at school, if they go and get those meat pies, you know, it will be a bit more balanced if you have those habits at home.
There are many ways in which we can include children to make those healthy choices. For example, it is always best to have them prepare their own meals, have them get involved in planning the menus throughout the day, having them pick their own fruits and vegetables from the vegetable aisle or the local market, okay? Having parents prepare different meals in different ways, pairing favorite foods with non-favorite foods, okay? Having the children sit down and actually eat as a family, okay, and not watching the TV or watching any local program, because when we tend to eat while we watch TV, we want to eat more also.
Yeah.
Okay, and it is always important to give the example, because if us as parents, we eat a certain food, they would want to eat it also. And it's not only common in childhood, but in adulthood, right? If we see someone eating something, then we'd want to have the same thing.
Speaking of adults, once we get to adulthood, if we're not eating superfoods because we never did, or we've gotten out of the habit of eating healthy, how do you talk to your clients about getting back into a better nutrition regime? Is it similar to the small steps? What is your...
Yes, it's similar to the small steps, okay? We start making very small changes the first weeks, and then we evolved into making some more specific changes later on, okay? Depends on how they progress, especially when it comes to wanting to lose weight. Okay, many adults tend to want to recur to some very easy or fast methods to lose weight. For example, recurring to fad diets, which only promote short weight loss during a short period of time, instead of giving good benefits in a longer time.
And there are actually some conditions that your diet can actually improve. Like I think diabetes is one. What are some of the adult conditions that by changing your diet, you can actually improve without medication or with a little medication?
Yes, by changing your diet, you can not only improve weight, but you can also prevent any chronic diseases, okay? First of all, diabetes is one that is very common here. High blood pressure, high cholesterol, gallbladder disease also. Okay, those would be the most common ones. Okay, and even joint pains. Okay, we see a lot of patients that are overweight and start to suffer from these joint pains. Okay, and the only thing that can relieve the joint pain is losing weight.
Speaking on diets, I find that in the average Belizean home, you have adults in this instance where the woman or the man may be prone to gaining weight rapidly and keeping that weight and having a difficulty of losing the weight. But the type of meal that is being prepared is very rich in terms of all the wrong things, so to speak. When you look at the Sunday meal, for instance, the rice, the potato salad may not necessarily be for you. I mean, there are other people in the family who can have that and enjoy it, and it has no long-term effect on them per se. But if you're, let's say, predisposed
and you see
to
that
weight
food,
gain,
and you have to be the only one at the table who cannot eat that, that can really cause some stress.
particularly if you're the one who prepared it.
Yes, if you that's a good point.
How do you deal with something like that? How do you begin that change, so to speak?
Okay. First of all, well, we need to address the patient and see what is really causing him to want to eat that certain food and those amounts, okay? Because it's not only a nutritional problem, sometimes it's even a psychological problem.
That's true. They say we eat our emotions.
We eat
right?
our emotions, okay? Or we eat when we get bored, okay? So that's very common. Okay, and it's very common in the family. Okay, that's why they now are starting to call it a familiar obesity, because it's not just one person, it's everyone in the family. And if we eat that way, if we are predisposed to those foods, then everybody else in the family will eat that way. Okay, it's a matter of not only the type of food, but the amount and the hours of the day. Okay, each patient has specific requirements depending on their age, their weight, their activity level, or if they have any underlying medical condition. So we'll need to address all of that and see exactly what changes can be done. Okay, for example, a very skinny person could be eating the same amount as someone that is overweight and not gaining any weight. But you think that it's not affecting him because he's not gaining weight.
Those people.
But in the long run, he's still eating the same amount of fat or sugar as the other person. However, that weight is not visible. Okay, but what is he gaining weight is that he's accumulating that fat and the sugar around his or her organs, okay, which is more dangerous than actually seeing the weight. So it's also internal.
And that's when you sometimes see people who look healthy, but they have heart disease,
eat all bad
or they
stuff
have some other. That's interesting. Are there certain superfoods, you mentioned the superfoods earlier, that are especially important for adults or can be helpful, and what to really avoid?
Okay. The recommendations, they are almost the same, starting from children all the way up to adults. But as we get older, the recommendations tend to become a little bit more specific, because that's when we are there's more chances of you developing any type of disease, especially if you are overweight. Okay, the first recommendation, especially in the elderly, is to have them reduce the consumption of salt. Okay, we find salt, not only the salt that we add to foods, but we tend to eat a lot of canned foods
that have salt.
That have salt, and those are preservatives that are found in the salt also. Okay, so those salts, they cause water retention, and then they can lead to an increase in high blood pressure. Okay, another thing is we need to start choosing healthy fats. Okay, when we talk about healthy fats, it would be include vegetable oils, avocados, nuts. Okay, those would be more healthy fats rather than fried foods. Okay, and other non-healthy fats. Another thing would be to decrease the amount of sugar that we eat. Okay, even the sugar that we consume, that says the products that say lighter, no sugar, those still have certain other stuff, okay, that we need to be aware of everything that we consume. Okay, another thing is that the older we get, the less water we're drinking. So we have a lot of elderly being dehydrated. So that's something that's very common. Okay,
and some people will start to drink not water, but things like Gatorade or juices, and juices actually have a lot of sugar. People think that drinking juice is a healthy option. Talk a bit about beverages, because in a hot country you have to be drinking something.
You have to be drinking, beverages, even sadly, even the juices that say 100% fruit juice, those do not have 100% fruit juice. They still have sugar. Okay, so the best beverage that we can have is water, and any juice that we prepare at home that we see what's actually added in it. Okay, any natural juice that you do.
I think for the most part, Belizeans are not as aware as they should be when it comes to the importance of water. You find that it is for them, or for us, I'm a Belizean, it is for us more trendy to buy a Gatorade or a Powerade or a Sprite or a Coke or fruit juice, as opposed to drinking a bottle of water. We don't look at the benefits of drinking water in terms of what it does for our skin, in terms of all the other things that come along with it. What would you say to the average person who, for whatever reason, has chosen to go the route of any other form of liquid intake as opposed to water?
And sometimes people will even say, oh, I don't like water. Or I don't drink, it has to have a flavor.
Especially children. It's very difficult to get them to drink water. Okay, water has many benefits. It occupies at least 60% of our body. Okay, water helps us to improve digestion, to move around the nutrients in our body. Okay, it's healthy for our skin. Okay, so if we don't drink water and then we, like here in Belize, since it's a very hot place, we walk a lot, we exercise, and we are not getting enough hydration, then it leads to something called dehydration. Okay, so if we consume, for example, Gatorades or juices, we are only consuming electrolytes, okay, not the water itself.
How do we know if we're dehydrated? What does that feel like?
Okay, there are different signs of dehydration. One of them would be first the thirst. You can have headaches. You can also have dry skin, pale skin. Okay, those would be the more specific signs of dehydration.
Can we go back to the elderly again? So they need to cut down on salt. And we're talking, everyone is different, but are we talking as we reach our 50s, as we reach our 60s? When does this change come about where we really need to be serious about drinking water, especially?
Okay, the water drinking, we should start as children. Okay, normally, like we said, children, it would be a little bit difficult to just give them water alone. So there's a way that many people tend to do in order to have these children or even the elderly consume water, since they say they don't like water. One is to just squeeze a little bit of lime and lemon and just drink it. Okay, you're still having water, you're not having sugar. Okay, so that would be put a cucumber in there. Okay, so that would be a good way to start. Now for the elderly, we would talk mostly after more than 60 years of age. Okay, so that's when the elderly stage starts.
I think that some elderly too, they lose their appetite. That's why you see a lot of older people who tend to be smaller. What kinds of foods can they eat that would sort of help them to feel good about food and get an appetite, or at least make sure they're eating something when they're not hungry?
Okay, yes, like you mentioned, the elderly, it's good to know exactly what would be the cause of their poor appetite, okay? Because mostly these poor appetites is because of they consume more than one medication, they start to have dental problems, they depend on people to eat, they start to have cognitive behaviors, whereas they forget to eat sometimes. So all of that can lead to a poor appetite and then eventually to weight loss. Okay, for the elderly, there are very important vitamins for them. For example, we can give them supplements, for example, of vitamin B12, B6, or folic acid. Okay, those are very helpful for them. However, we can also find those in whole grains, in lean meats, vegetables, fruits, as organic foods. Okay, but when that is not helping, then we need to recur to something a little bit more. Okay, and then for the elderly that definitely do not eat, then we have those commercially supplements that come in the form of powders that you can give them. But that is only when their appetite is
so it's actually similar to overeating. You have to figure out what the underlying cause of the lack of appetite is, as well as the cause of overindulging. That's a really interesting point.
It's interesting as well that you would mention the loss of appetite based on the medication that the elderly in some cases would have to be on. You find that the number of pills, for instance, if they're dealing with hypertension, diabetes, or any other ailments that afflict them at that age, you find that the number of pills and the different kinds of pills come with certain side effects. Some of those side effects may very well include a loss of appetite.
Loss of appetite, yeah.
The balance in terms of being able to stay on this particular regimen and still be able to eat healthy, how can that be struck?
Okay. First of all, we need to see exactly what type of pills the patient is eating and at what type of the day the patient needs to take the certain pill. And then afterwards, we would break that down into different hours of the day. Okay, we'll try, if it's possible, if the pills can be taken in between meals, then better, because then that way it won't affect the meal that the patient is having. But if that is not the case, then we'd have to try to find different foods in order for the patient to consume it at the same time they're having the pills. Okay, it's not only a matter of consuming whole or hard foods. For some elderly, we have to change the consistency of the foods, giving them soft foods, even if it's drinking a shake or taking a protein shake, as long as they have something so as not to skip the meal, especially when it comes to taking pills.
That's interesting. I think that, again, those underlying causes is where a nutritionist can really help figure out. And so if you have someone in your life who's elderly and they are not eating, it's not just because old people don't like to eat. There's probably a reason, and there may be if anything from a physical reason in terms of the consistency or some underlying reason. So I think that's a very valuable thing. The other thing I'm taking away from this is small changes, because I think sometimes we set ourselves up to fail because we say January 1. Going on a cleanse, right? You see people do these cleanses, and they're angry and they're cranky for 3 weeks, and they lose 10 pounds, and then a month later it's back. And so I think that the small changes are the thing that I'm really getting as in the middle. I'm not quite elderly yet, son, so I'm no longer a child, but I'm not elderly, so I'm in that adult phase of small incremental changes that are lasting.
Yes.
That's right. Well, this is great. Thank you so much, Doris Gaylene Sutherland, from Belize Healthcare Partners, a nutritionist with some really, really good advice and timely, because this is it. This is a time when these changes that we're trying to make start to fall off unless we can be reminded of lasting change and how that's effective. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Happy New Year. We're going to come back and we're really going to go to the birds, if you will, with a segment on the Belize Raptor Center. Here, it's based in San Ignacio. We have some guests from there. So we'll be right back after this break on Open Your Eyes.